again, and welcome to ManchTalk. I'm Tammy Simmons.
And I'm Carla Gericke.
And we're glad that you're tuning in. We skipped last week. It was like pouring or something crazy.
Oh, it was like hailing and the wind and
it
the
was
storms.
Kind of a lame excuse to skip it, but it's July and
it was.
Sometimes we just need to skip things. But we're back and the weather is beautiful. I mean, this is July. This is when we're supposed to have big summer stuff. Really hot. I did take advantage of it and sold an air conditioner last week on Friday.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah, I had an extra huge, like 10,000 BTU one sitting in our shed that we just took out last year, and we were like, we've realized our house doesn't need that size to stay cool. So Friday I was like, oh, it's going to be hot. Sell the air conditioner. Sure enough, I did. So that was a good thing. Now if I could just sell the damn Jetta wagon that's sitting on my front lawn, I'd be really happy. But that's coming. I know that we're on the brink of that. Splash Pad opened a few weeks back. Hunt Pool, which is, I believe, the one that's over near Gill Stadium in that area, opened last week before the hot weekend. So good on that. Glad to see that people have. And Crystal Lake's open. I've never been to Crystal Lake.
I haven't swum there, but I've gone there.
Yeah.
It's very charming.
Yeah.
It's actually this beautiful little lake with this awesome old stone pool house.
Oh.
Like, it's actually quite, yeah.
I should go just to see it. It's weird that I've lived in New Hampshire. I mean, maybe I've gone and I just don't remember, but I think I would remember that.
I remember actually being surprised. I went there for the first time last year. We were, I think, just looking for a place to take the dog or trying something new kind of thing. And stopped and was like, oh, what is this charming place? You know, it has a beautiful, like I said, old boathouse, stone building. I guess that's where they maybe stored the boats when people used to paddle in the old days. Anyway, it seems quite nice.
I should take a ride out.
Yeah.
So, news this week, which this isn't really news, it's just in the news because some other entity can read words and wrote letters saying we can read words. If you recall, last November you were asked to vote in a school charter commission, despite the fact that Mark Warden, who's a state rep out of Ward 8 and is running for re-election, had filed a lawsuit against the city because the criteria for filing in the piece of legislation contradicted what is actual general practice and actually general, applicable.
So it was illegally convened.
It shouldn't have happened.
There was a lawsuit. I believe he filed initially for an injunction.
Yeah.
The court said, well, we can't issue an injunction because we've already printed the ballots, so we'll just let you do it, and then we'll fix it later. That part, I believe, is still currently pending.
I don't think the court ever did the later part. So that's last November. Now we're in this year. We elect this school charter commission. They meet. There are some members, Will Infantine, Joe LaChance, who are like, hey, I don't think we have any authority to actually be doing any of this. Hey, there's this lawsuit. Hey, there's all these things. Maybe we shouldn't spend the taxpayers' dollars because we did spend about $25,000 of taxpayer money on these, on convening this whole thing, because you have to have somebody do the minutes. I mean, there's things.
Steps,
right? So, to backtrack a little, this all came about, it came about for different reasons, no doubt, but this was generated from a bill, HB 544 from 2019, that was put in by Pat Long, who is a state representative representing Ward 3 and a current alderman, and at the time, I believe that he put the bill in, he was on the school board, imagine that. And the thing about when you put in legislation, because I've been there, and I have found myself on the end of things on a piece of legislation where it doesn't say what I wanted. I had put a bill in years ago about, it was something about insurance. Oh, it was about car insurance, but not saying that if you got something about insurance, and you go to legislative services and they help you draft the language and everything. And I remember I said, I think I need to change this. And they said, oh, no, you can achieve that by doing this. And, they convince you that, oh, okay, because you're the experts. And they wrote this piece of legislation and I approved it, the final draft and everything. And when we got to committee, I had to say, I think I think the people opposing this are right. This is changing the wrong part of law, and as much as it's a good idea, and everybody was
Would that perhaps be, Tammy, because there are too many laws and nothing makes sense anymore?
And one person could think this is going to be, but the Legislative Services Office, as much as you think they're there to make sure that the bill is written as well as possible, that's not their job. Is just to help you. And I realized.
Well, and the thing is also, I mean, a lot of things that happen that go wrong with government aren't because of malice.
No.
They're purely because it's too big,
too
or
complicated,
incompetence, or, just really, like with the law, it can often be that, you're like, oh, I want to change this little thing, but that little thing applies to that,
and it's
that.
not streamlined. I was looking this morning, somebody on Facebook was asking a question about rent increases, and Ross Berry, who's running in Ward 9 for state rep, and he's a property owner. He commented back that most of the tenant laws are in RSA 540, and people, right away people are like, you should call this person and you should call this one, and I'm thinking, or you should actually just read what the law says about what your issue is. But then when I went to 540 and I started looking, and I was like, God, this is so complicated, because you can't just find. It took me a while, and I understand how the RSAs are written, and eventually I found it and I shared it back to the person, because I'm thinking, you're not going to find this.
Right.
So it is complicated, but we digress. So Pat Long, it is infinite wisdom as your one of your representatives and a member of the Board of School Committee at the time and the Aldermanic Board now.
And just to be clear, I mean, the thinking behind separating these two things is basically
the school district and the alderman, yes.
Right. So is to try and create. Manchester currently has, thanks to people like Tammy who went door to door 12 years ago at this stage, we have a tax cap, right? And that tax cap protects us, the taxpayers, from the city becoming crazy and, just spending money
every year, 10% tax
willy-nilly and things going up. I mean, we do know that this year, regardless of everything that's gone on, the reduction in services, the fact that schools were closed and all of that, we somehow are still going to have a property tax increase, probably to pay for that secret little union contracts that were all passed while we didn't have public meetings. But be that as it may. So the Charter Commission's goal is to get out from under the tax cap.
The people behind wanting the Charter Commission's goal is to get out from under the tax cap. I don't believe that everybody on the Charter Commission wants to get out from under the tax cap. The Republicans that were elected to the Charter Commission were like, hold on, no. In fairness, the Charter Commission did not recommend that they get out from underneath the cap. They just oddly worded it so that they would have, ultimately, they were still going to hold the alderman responsible. They were still going to have to be the bad guys.
Right. But, so they were like, we're not going to follow the tax cap, but when people complain, they need to complain to you, the alderman, not to us, the Charter Commission.
Back in 2019, the illustrious Pat Long put in a piece of legislation that was going to create this Charter Commission, and they were going to be able to make recommendations, and it specifically said for placement on the November 2020 ballot. Because I will tell you, when we did the tax cap, we didn't specify it needed to be on a specific ballot. We specified that it needed to be on the next ballot.
Oh, okay. Yep.
So, the bill, it's a one-page bill. It's not a very lengthy bill, and there's always words. And I've always learned over the years to take all the fluff, all the stuff that's not specifically relevant but has to be in there for legal purposes, and come up with what the piece of legislation actually says, because words have meaning. And every time I say words have meaning, for some reason I think of Steve Valancourt. So there. Because he always said elections have consequences. Words have meanings, elections have consequences. So anyways, the bill that he put in that resulted in a change to RSA 49B:15 basically says, a charter commission shall be established to develop a local procedure, then there's stuff, to revise, amend, or replace the Manchester School District Charter. And it goes on, blah, blah, blah. The very next sentence, the Charter Commission shall submit its recommendations for a procedure to revise, amend, or replace the Manchester School District Charter in the form of a ballot question to the Manchester School District voters for a vote at the November 2020 regular election. Now we can mince this all up and say, what makes somebody a Manchester School District voter? How can you revise, amend, or replace the Manchester School District Charter when there is no such document? There's lots of words in there that don't make sense beside. But the crux of the problem that they really had is that once you do this, we did this with the tax cap, and trust me, I know, because I had to read RSAs and my ears bled because it can be so difficult to read and digest and pull out all the pieces that are relevant and, make sure that everything we were doing for the spending cap and the tax cap, that we were dotting our I's and crossing our T's and following the letter of the law, because that matters. So you have to take whatever recommendations, and they have to go up to the state, because the Department of Revenue Administration gets involved because it involves a tax cap. The Attorney General's office has to make sure that it's legal. And there's another one. I think it's Secretary of State's office or somebody like that everybody's got to sign off on these proposed changes. Well, on July 17th, the Attorney General's office issued a response to Mike Lopez, who's the chairman of the School Charter Commission, and basically said, upon further review, we conclude that the process under RSA 9049B15, Pat Long's words, has not been followed, and as a result, the reviewing agencies are unable to engage in the review process under Chapter 49B, because it says, we shall submit its recommendations for a procedure. Nothing in Pat Long's piece of legislation that became law said the School Charter Commission has the authority to do anything other than recommend a procedure.
Right.
So the only thing that can come out of that committee that spent $25,000 of your tax money is a procedure to revise, amend, or replace the Manchester School District Charter.
Which, by the way, does not exist.
So that's the only thing that can come out of that committee.
Because there was an article in yesterday's Union Leader about this too, where they start and they say the Attorney General's office has informed members of the Manchester School District Charter Commission it is unable to complete its review of the recommended revisions because the proper process wasn't followed at the local level.
Right, because words have meanings. So even worse, because I've read the letter, I've got a copy of the letter that was sent to Mike Lopez, and I wanted to read through and see what else it said. Even more interesting, so they refer to it says that this provision does not authorize the commission to propose direct amendments to a charter subject to the process, blah, 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 blah. If there's a conflict in the statutes, if RSA 49B15, or B14 says X, and then B15 is enacted later and says Z, they generally will go to the later one, especially if it's more specific. This very clearly was specific. This said, on the November 2020 ballot, we will do this. So there's precedence for why the AG's office is saying that this doesn't work. It also says, we further note that this statute requires the Commission's recommended process to be submitted in the form of a ballot question to the Manchester School District voters for a vote at the November 20 regular election. We interpret this to mean that the Commission's process must be approved first by the voters before any substantive charter members can be proposed, right? This question cannot be added to the November 2020 general election ballot and must be submitted to the voters on a separate ballot.
Wow.
See RSA 663, which outlines specific questions that are authorized to be submitted on the ballot of a state election.
Is that because it's process-driven?
It's because the RSA 663 allows on state ballots, which is the November ballot.
Oh, this would have to be a city
questions about amending the state constitution. There's a provision about lottery changes. There's this provision about liquor changes. So there could be a question about whether Manchester allows liquor. There are certain specific things that are outlined as
that are
allowed.
Statewide, but not city.
But they're not, unless
they
they pertain to the lottery or the liquor.
Oh, okay.
So there's there's limited
because
things.
only government is allowed to do gambling and alcohol sales.
So not only can the changes that the Charter Commission spent $25,000 coming up with recommendations to change to allow taxing authority basically to the schools and start the process of letting them just tax you as much as they want. They can't even put the recommendations for a procedure on how to do that.
Well, I actually think that's good, because I was very concerned, as we live in these sort of uncharted times, so to speak. There's a genuine concern for me when there's a lawsuit or there's something and people, the courts are just like, well, we don't know. And
nobody knows.
Someone's suing and someone else is like, well, we don't know. And then the scary part for me is when things just keep going on, right? So it's like, oh, none of us are following the laws anymore, but we're just going to pretend. So I'm actually really relieved that the AG's office has come out
reviewing
and said,
this and saying, hey, wait a minute.
You know what? This cannot go on the ballot.
Well,
because once again, the actual Charter Commission and that vote that happened was
shouldn't have happened in the first place.
Right.
And I mean, in fairness, when we were doing the spending and the tax caps, originally we collected those signatures. I mean, there was other signature things that failed, not because of the signatures, but because of technical glitches. In 2008, when I read way too many RSAs and stood on way too many sunny sidewalks collecting signatures, in 2008, when we wanted it on the ballot, it wasn't on the ballot, and that was because of specific timelines laid out in RSAs and the manipulation of our Democrat-controlled alderman at the time to circumvent that. And they succeeded. So it didn't go on the 2008 ballot. It ended up on the 2009 ballot, and it passed. Now, once it passed, then somebody filed a lawsuit saying they were unconstitutional. And the thing about when you find the court decides that something's unconstitutional, it doesn't erase the law. It just says it's unconstitutional. The law still stays on the books. So that was, again, the Democrats trying to circumvent the cap. So naturally, we in 2000, I think it was 11, we passed legislation that tweaked whatever the words were that the court based their decision on, and made it so that it was retroactive to all spending caps, because it's not just Manchester. Franklin has a spending cap. I think Dover has a spending cap, and we're not the only ones that have had caps.
Don't you think this, I was talking to someone about this the other day, how interesting it's going to be to see what happens in the college towns if the colleges don't reopen, or they pivot more to
remote learning. Will those students vote absentee from Michigan to New Hampshire?
I mean, I hope not, because they really shouldn't be voting here to start with.
Right.
But that will be sort of an interesting thing to see. Because I think, if I was a Republican in one of these towns, I would definitely. This is your chance, man.
Think about it. The problem that we always talk about is the student that's from, say, Michigan, right? Who goes to UNH in Durham.
Who is paying out-of-state tuition, which is a question that answers itself.
So now you've got this Michigan student who's still on mommy and daddy's insurance in Michigan, has a new Michigan driver's license, moves temporarily to Dover or Durham or whatever, and lives in a dorm at UNH. And somehow claims they're now a New Hampshire resident, and then votes in Durham and impacts Durham's local elections and state and federal elections. And part of the argument you'll hear is, well, why should those students have to go through that awful complicated process of voting absentee? The same process that everybody in the military does, everybody who works remotely does. So anyways, it will be interesting to see if that same Michigan student who loved influencing New Hampshire politics, even though they didn't actually live here, will take the time now from Michigan to request a New Hampshire absentee ballot.
The question isn't will they make the time. I think the question is will the billionaires who fund the Democrat Party to the tune of 2/3 more money goes from billionaires and corporations to the Democratic political machine than actually goes to Republicans, regardless of what you're told back home. The Democratic political machine is funded by billionaires and by corporations to a much larger tune than Republicans. So the question would be, are they going to spend their money to try and influence elections in New Hampshire? Because here's the thing about New Hampshire is we are a unique state. You know, we have the New Hampshire advantage that, of course, is with that we don't have sales tax and we don't have income tax. Why are those things important? They're important because when you have low taxes, you have low spending, and low spending and low taxes go together. What does that mean? The less the state spends, the more money you and I and you at home have to spend on the things you think are important. Now, if anyone's gone through the last 6 months and thinks that we should be giving more power to the government, I hope you are starting to reconsider that, because, you know, we are just lockstep, goose-stepping towards a tyrannical police state.
Keep watching. I really do take the time to try to watch opposing views. I do think there's a bit of hysteria. I happen to believe that the virus is a real live thing. I don't think it's a hoax. I do think people catch it. I do think some people get sick. I cannot equate what is happening in New Hampshire or Maine with what's happening in Texas or Florida, because we are not in Texas or Florida. We are in New Hampshire, and Maine has very similar numbers to New Hampshire.
And partly I think it's because New Hampshire is a more prosperous state because we don't have a sales and income tax, and because people are healthier, and because we have this ethos of personal responsibility.
Right. Well, and, you know, there's so much fear and anxiety over the virus because people are getting caught up in the fear and the anxiety. And I really
that is being spread on purpose by the government to terrify you so that you will obey them.
I don't know if people really think about the fact that their emotional responses are being manipulated or not. But just this morning, John DePietro, who does a ton of data crunching, so, you know, he's one of my go-tos. He had a post. You can find his Facebook page, John DePietro, DiPietro, because the school board's discussing on the plan on opening the schools. And there is no perfect solution. I mean, that's going to satisfy everybody. So you've got the union leaders running an article that says teachers are terrified. Except if you look at the survey that was done by the Board of Education, like 70 or 80% of teachers said, yes, they want to get back to their classroom. And only half of them say they'll feel safer. Not even half say they'll feel safer if the kids have to wear masks all the time.
And 65% of parents said they're ready for schools to go back. And also, can I just say, I was really, 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 really offended on that survey that I happened to see that they had all the stakeholders except taxpayers.
Right.
I don't have children. You don't have children. Right. We pay a lot of property taxes.
More than half.
Some kind of say.
Well, and so John posted a post this morning about data and science, and he actually had to he put some graphs out there that are worth looking at. They are Massachusetts numbers, and you might say, well, why would he do that? Well, because the numbers in New Hampshire are so small that when you try to look at the average age of deaths and whatever, our numbers are negligible. Like, you can't get actual data because the pool is too small. Because we've had
less than 400 deaths.
So in Massachusetts, you know, he's got a thing about deaths and death rate by age group, and in the 0 to 19 range, nobody dies. Like, the death rate is 0. So when everybody's panicking, I mean, literally, irrationally panicking about putting their children back in school.
Sheer terror was the word that was used. Look, if you're suffering from sheer terror, you have to turn off your TV.
Right. Well, you really do need to step back and say, am I really being emotional? Because I do see how being home by yourself or home with a limited pool of people is very
isolating
and it changes the way our brains are rewired.
And especially if you're just watching him being bombarded by these news stories, where everything is this frequency that is just I wish I had my brain.
Facebook here. I watched a video. I posted it on my personal Facebook page. I'll try to share it out onto ManchTalk. It was a medical doctor who's treating patients in Michigan, who said he literally had to pull over on the side of the road and make this video because he's so perplexed about the response of people going back to the schools and the teachers and everything, because the likelihood of those students even contracting COVID is low.
very like
but then it's
statistically
like
low.
the chance of those people dying from COVID is like less than, not even 1%. So
it's like 0.000000001%.
It's just, it is irrational. And you have to start listening to medical professionals who are actually dealing with the virus. And he kept talking about that the virus is weakening, and he's like, and I'm not going to get into how or why. He goes, but it's biology, and like as a doctor, he can see why it is that our numbers are declining. And it's not just our
I think that's partly what is driving this sort of new push towards the mask mandates and all of that stuff is, I think this is all political at this stage,
well,
right?
I agree.
And so with politics, it's about control, and it's like, well, if we can create this class of fearful people, then the question becomes, which party does that benefit,
well,
right? I mean, I will tell you who it doesn't benefit, folks back home. It doesn't benefit us as humankind, mankind, being kind to each other. So if you're like up in arms about any of this stuff, take a chill pill. Yep. Maybe just step back, switch off the TV.
Maybe have rational conversations with other people who might have differing points of view, because I ask people who are very mad, and I'm like, so explain to me how if there's a mask mandate in Los Angeles, and has been for quite a while their numbers continue to increase, where New Hampshire and Maine continue to decrease. If it was literally the mask, our numbers would be going up because not everybody in New Hampshire is wearing a mask. So there's something else out there. I think I posted the other day, I think the biggest victim of this whole virus is the ability for people to think objectively.
Oh, well, yeah.
I have seen so many people you might as well just throw up your hands and be like, because that's what it's like. They're not even, you can't even have, and it's on both sides. Because from my perspective, you've got the people, if we don't wear masks, we're all going to die. And on the flip side, there's people who are like, scream at the people who don't want to wear masks. And I'm like, I can't, that doesn't get us anywhere. And no, it isn't. The virus is real. It's just not quite as scary as some people would have you believe.
So and the numbers of people who are contracting it are going up, but the number of deaths are going down.
And the number of hospitalizations are going down.
Right.
So it is
so
weakening.
We probably have, we're close to a herd immunity tipping point. There's
or
probably,
to the point where
it's
more like this doctor this morning said, this is going to be in the background just like every virus is for a long, long time. We're never going to eradicate it. We're never going to stop it completely. Even if we had a vaccine, that is not going to stop it completely. So try to take a breath. Try not to be panicked. Think
just
about
be good to the people around you. Different people are allowed to have different opinions because we have different appetites for risk, and it doesn't have to be this contentious and this ugly. Really,
it has really gotten it's become very political. Like, you cannot have a rational conversation because it's, Biden says we should all be wearing masks mandatory. Okay, based on what? Well, based on Orange Man bad. Orange Man bad, virus bad, so Orange Man and virus even badder. That's like the kind of baseline logic that's being applied. So anyways, we're being told we have to wrap up, which means we're out of time. So enjoy your week, and we'll be back next week. How quick was that?
Take care now.
Bye.